Guess we're going to go through some Q&A now, and we're all up here to answer any questions that you may have and to go through some of the feedback that you have from those sessions. So perhaps if we could start with, let's start with the e-learning crew. Who was responsible for that group? Hey, Shelley. In fact, could we get the roving mic? Ellen, have you got those there? Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to actually pass the mics to the representatives of each group so that you can deliver the message down to us, and then we'll go through your questions and suggestions. Enough already, Sean. Oh, you're there. Oh, okay. Hold on. Were you part of Shelley's group?
Did we have two groups?
I'm going to Shelley.
David, I'll come to you next.
Okay. So one of the things we asked about do you want us to start at the top first?
Wherever.
Okay. Some of the upcoming trends, we were wondering about more integration within mobile devices and how quickly that's going to come on board.
Any specific mobile integrations or any?
No, it was very general what we got for the top part. So we were thinking mobile devices, we're talking about how much better iframes could be embedded, and that the screens could be a lot more fluid so they'd resize quickly and not affect any of the content that we're looking at. So
all right, do you want to answer? So just in terms of the mobile strategy in general, obviously with 15.5, that's going to open it up to a much broader range of mobile devices. You can expect it to work on anything from a smartphone to an iPad, also including all the Android, Apple devices. So all of those will be supported with the new interface. And we've obviously focused on touch as well, so that's going to be critical to those devices, so they've been included in that process. So you can expect that to be rolled out in our 15.5 release coming in, I guess, the end of October. You'll start to see that. And then I'm planning that most schools probably won't roll that out straight away, that you're going to want some time to digest what that means. So I suspect most schools are probably going to lean towards a Christmas time upgrade so that you can announce in the new year that you've got the mobile interface. In terms of the iframes and responsiveness of all of those things, obviously there's some limitations there with the technologies that we're using. Not everything can be solved in a browser. So we do have some limitations, and we try and make it as flexible as possible. The best way we can do that is by actually making it more and more controlled by our system and less controlled by the users. So that's where rebuilding that text editor will come into play and providing you with embed functionality within the text editor. So rather than you embedding an iframe and controlling all the attributes of that, I'd rather see it you select a Google Doc or a YouTube video or another type of embeddable media, and you just search for that, select it, and we take care of creating the code that embeds that. And in the process, we make it much more flexible, and we do the best we can to make it work on all devices. But there are limitations, and it's always going to be problematic embedding third-party code. First and foremost, we can't actually control the content in that iframe at all. We can't even tell how big that content is. So we're sort of limited there by what the contents of that iframe do, and that's going to be the biggest roadblock in that type of area.
Next. Was that all that you had, Shell?
we had heaps on
features. Yeah. I guess read off some more.
So if we were looking at areas that sort of needed improvement, we were looking at potentially tracking of students and staff in quizzes, so how long they'd been in quizzes, what they'd actually done, how even on pages, and when they'd been asked to do certain tasks, so that we could sort of use that as part of our formative analysis of them and assessment of them to see if they were just clicking on a video, opening it up, looking at it and closing it and saying, yes, I've self-assessed. and also leading into whether that could be part of our professional development of staff, so being able to quiz them and get that tracking and analysis back.
Yeah, again, back on one of the slides that James had up earlier in terms of our development roadmap in those insights, definitely we're interested to track more about the usage of each user within the system on a much more fine-grained detail in terms of how long they spent doing things, how many pages, what they did on those pages, what components are being used on those pages, how many submissions were created, etc., etc. So just more data that we're able to store, and then we're going to try to think about how best we can represent that in terms of reporting and so forth for you to kind of track that usage more accurately.
Okay. In regard to...
sorry,
Anna.
I just wanted to add that the teachers also discussed this as being something that would be really effective in terms of behavioural management within a class as well. So, great idea.
So in regard to the features, one of the things that came out was in the course builder you don't see the content such as an iframe or an image that you've imported when you are previewing it through the course builder. You have to import it onto your classroom page before you can actually see it. So to be able to see what you put in your course builder, especially if you embed an iframe, and I haven't done this, but it didn't look like a yellow box, you could actually see in a preview mode what you were doing.
Can't you just flip it onto student or like read mode on that unit page?
No.
Okay.
Apparently not. Okay. Also, we were wondering if e-portfolio pages could be exportable. That was another thing. And we also were talking about searchable metadata.
Yeah, the exportable e-portfolios, if you've been a common attendee to these events for the past 4 years, has been top on the list. I've said before and say it sort of again, the issue with e-portfolios is that they're really a living document and that they do have real live functionality on them, such as video and audio, and we have blogs and commenting and all of these types of active features that make them a living document. I think from our perspective, what we're more interested in doing then, rather than exporting them to a dead tree or something similar to that, is making them more visible to external users. So making them, I guess, accessible to the public internet. The issue there, of course, is that we then run into problems around the privacy and cyberbullying and a whole lot of other duty of care issues that I'm not particularly comfortable dealing with. But it is something that is on the list of things to address. And in a past lifetime, I actually built an e-portfolio system for the South Australian Education Government, and they worked around the issue by making teachers approve every change that students made to their e-portfolios before it went live. Of course, that didn't last very long because no teacher wants to sit there all night approving hundreds of commits to e-portfolios. So I don't think that was a successful method, but I'm sure there are successful ways to get it out there, but that's something we're still investigating.
Can we go to David?
We must have had a breakaway e-learning integrator group, but I won't go over what we've already done. We had priority to reach out to follow other student management systems, dynamic groups of users. I chucked that one in. We looked at more analytics, looking at other things like ClickView or Track1, getting those systems integrated, or if James can do that because he's...
Just on that, we talked, it was mentioned there before about tracking students and what they've done. That's sort of the idea behind the course builder and tasks within the course builder, and we're going to extend that functionality. Currently at the moment, when you click on, as a student, when you click on an activity in the course list, the course outline, it actually tracks that you've clicked on that. And you can do that with things like ClickView or whatever the resource might be. You can link them up as tasks, and you can track students' clicks onto those resources. Obviously, we can't track their engagement. That's what teachers need to do themselves. So when it comes to actually working out whether the students watched the video, whether they learnt something, that's where assessment comes in. And so I do recommend including, if you've got a ClickView video or a video you want students to watch, always just ask a couple of quick questions after they've watched the video, just to assess their knowledge and make sure that they have engaged with that content. Our system's never going to tell you whether they learnt something or not just by watching what they clicked on.
Rubrics was a big area for us. Rubric bank, like there is a question bank. Share and collaborate with other teachers was a major need there, so that it's not having to do it all on each course builders. We want a not applicable for rubrics. So when someone says they didn't do that criteria, it doesn't actually add to the tally. We've discussed that one before. Quiz, section score tallies, we've discussed that one too. These are some of these I just chucked in as I was writing it. In capital letters is sports fixturing as well, just for you, James. I've got also, section score tallies. So if you do section A, section B, section C, and then you have to add them all up yourself, like I did last week. Put in a mark for a quiz on a student's behalf if they didn't sit it at the same time, or they did it on paper. I think that was the use case there. The ability to pull criteria from Synergetic. So we've already put it into Synergetic. We already pay someone to put that in for us. We then have to put it in ourselves again in Schoolbox. And then when it goes back to Synergetic, it merges it into one percentage grade. So to put it back across into the criteria. You with me?
No, not at all.
So at the moment, if we put the marks into Schoolbox, through a rubric, if we have 10 criteria, it mashes it into one percentile.
No, I understand that.
Yep.
We are aware. By the way, just to explain that for people who didn't understand it, when we did the Synergetic Markbook integration, we had to do a shortcut when it came to rubrics. So the shortcut was that we basically put a percentage in for a rubric, which is clearly not very accurate and probably not even very useful at the end of the day, because why mark with criteria when in Schoolbox, when you don't get the same criteria results in Synergetic. So we're aware that that was a shortcut, and we do plan to extend that functionality and synchronise the criteria between Schoolbox and Synergetic so that the same criteria exist in both systems. So when you mark a criteria in Schoolbox, we can have a place to put that data into Synergetic as well.
We have student-written criteria for rubrics. Peer assessment, so students can mark each other's work rather than the teacher marking it. E-portfolio, the pages need full class page functionality. We also need the teachers to be able to post as either role, either as the student or as the teacher. There's some use cases where the teachers post on behalf of like a student in year 3 to make it look like it's them, but we also want it to look like the teachers commenting back on the student's work. Due work, draft dates and like sub-due dates, so they can submit a draft and not have to have separate submission boxes, like a draft submission box and then a final one. We want you to look at turn it in as opposed to page scan, and we'd like Alaris to take some responsibility over that one.
Just on that one, Sean's going to comment on that.
Yeah, I'll just comment on that. I did have a conversation with Turnitin on Tuesday night, despite the time zone difference, and that went quite positively. There is some business relationship stuff that needs to be ironed out as part of that process, but the agreement as it stands right now is that I've opened up a scoping document. I've had an initial discussion with them around what it is that we'd like to achieve in terms of replacing both annotations and plagiarism scanning, and we're going to explore whether or not they can meet our criteria and requirements for integrating and I guess solving the requirement, or solving what we currently have, and if we're able to work out that, then I'm sure that the business side of things is going to work itself out, and then we would be more than pleased to work with them on it. So that's happening. That's a work in progress.
Quiz that's printable, I should say, for students with disability, accessibility issues there. That links back to the use case also of the teacher then putting in the mark for the student in the quiz. Group submissions, comments, groups, James already touched on that before on the roadmap, but not just sort of mainstream and advanced groups. It'd be actually groups that are flexible from different tasks or different units of the, not just for the whole course, or units of course, it'd be for different due work items. Comments then back to different individuals and not just to the group. And a member could be in multiple groups. Mary Lou wants level of mastery, so progression to open up more tasks. So you have to complete some tasks and then open up more tasks.
Can I just comment on that one? Just so in terms of people's understanding of this, there's sort of a idea that within an LMS system you can have it so that students can self-progression, unlock content based on, I guess, the level of competency of that student so that they can access more difficult content if they're getting good results. That requires quite a high level of programming into your course material. And I just wanted to get a sort of an audience perception on whether you think teachers are at the level where they could be creating multiple streams based on if statements and clauses that say, if you do this, unlock this content. Do you think your teachers would be comfortable doing that type of activity at this stage?
Show of hands.
Yeah.
But you see, that's the thing there, is that obviously that's a huge amount of development work, and then there's just a small use case right now of people that may be at the level where they could make use of that. But it's something that we can
the other thing I'm always concerned about is the added complexity it adds into our interface. So if you're adding in all that extra functionality, you have to, I guess, make it so that your other teachers not on that higher end of the spectrum where they're programming their course material can still approach the system and not be intimidated by all this complex programming and control over the course material. So it is a delicate balance there, and I'm just trying to get a perspective of where we're at with that, whether we're ready to go down that pathway yet or not. My general feel is that we're not quite ready, maybe a year or two away before teachers have got the confidence to start putting their content in a way that is dynamic and adaptive to their students' needs.
I'm going to keep moving. David, is there anything else?
No,
You're good. I'll also just capitalise on one of the points you mentioned early on. Is this still working? Yeah. Was dynamic group membership and who else? All right. So yeah, that's a really good show of hands. So we tend to agree on that as well. It's something that the executive team in the middle of the room was also discussing the use cases around the parent, particularly the parent homepages, being able to dynamically keep those lists up to date. So that's noted too.
I just want to jump in. We've got about 5 to 6 minutes before afternoon tea, so we can move through the groups. And if you could keep it to your top 3, that would be great.
David,
can we get to the IT? I'd like to hear from the junior schools as well, up the back. I think they were. Anyone up the back? Is there any rep from the junior schools? Does anyone have? Yeah, okay. Ellen, could you go up there and pass the mic?
so just while we're getting the mic up there, I just wanted to while I can get everyone with a show of hands, we did this a while back when we were talking about resource booking and sports fixtures. We got everyone to do a show of hands on who would like or who would be potentially want to use a sports fixtures system. Back then we got about 3 or 4 hands, but how many hands do we have now about a sports fixture system? All right.
Yeah. Okay.
So it looks like we've got the overwhelming majority now, so it's definitely in demand.
Me. Check.
So, yeah, that's definitely a good one.
Okay, so from the junior school perspective, a lot of things that we talked about have been covered already. We're very keen to look at the differentiation of things that you create. We would like the ability to overlay photos within text boxes instead of having to create them in PowerPoint or Photoshop or something and then put them in. I don't know if that's possible within... Haven't thought about that?
Photo editing.
Sorry, these guys don't really know what you're talking about. Do you mean the, like, because I'm on the same page. These guys just don't get us. We're the special two. I'm not going to sing. Do you mean the ability to sort of like crop things, like if you're putting an image in the tile, select where it sits within the tile and adjust the colours? Is that the sort of thing you mean?
Yeah, not necessarily in a tile, even just in a text box.
But just in general.
Yeah. Like if we wanted to blur a picture out in the background and have another picture overlaid over the top to make it a bit more interesting and, modern.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we use now.
We'd like something like that.
Yeah, we'd like something like that built in.
I like it. I'm with you. Have a community. I'll vote.
Okay.
Just to let you know, the mic isn't working down the front.
That's fine.
We're also looking forward to developments in formative assessment. So that's somewhere where our school and other schools are interested in going down, and just we're looking forward to developments in that area. Yeah.
Do you have any particular things that you would like us to think about in terms of formative assessment?
Do you want to answer that one?
I've sent him a list.
Okay.
I've got the list.
You've got the list already, James.
All
Have
right,
a look at it.
I'll look
Share
at the
it.
list.
Okay. And we really like that the interactive features that you are offering within Schoolbox. So, yeah.
Thank you.
That's it.
Cool.
So do we have IT somewhere? Has it got a representative from IT? Matt?
Oh, we got the doctor.
Oh, yeah.
He's actually not a doctor.
Yeah, someday I might get my doctorate, but that's not anytime soon. So if I limit this to the top three from the IT managers, one was a question around what upcoming trends, cloud, to be able to sort of explore possibility of current installs being able to be moved up to cloud, and so. Sam's just going to go hide in a corner now.
So yeah, just on that, just so everyone's aware, we do actually have some cloud infrastructure being built underway. The concept behind that is that Schoolbox will be spread across an Amazon instance, well, not many instances, and it will be broken into many small parts, and schools will be able to sign on to become part of that scaling infrastructure. So we're building out that infrastructure now. In fact, the school in Pakistan that we were talking about earlier is actually our first school running on that infrastructure, and we're going to continue to build it out from there. So in the future, you will be able to opt for a cloud-based install if you choose to. The issues that you need to be aware of before you go down that path just at the moment are that the latency between your student management system and the cloud can be quite large. So most schools, still an on-site install is probably the best. But in the future, when the IT departments all want to get rid of their capital expense, we'll be ready to host your Schoolbox in the cloud as well.
Another key bugbear was search in general, particularly sorting things by relevance. And so I suppose just an exploration of an overall overhaul of search. Another key thing was some love and attention to quiz and survey, giving them some just general attention and upgrades. And
did you tell them that you had, Matt?
I didn't want to admit that now, did I?
Yeah, no, Matt's done probably, and Steve as well, have both worked on that quite extensively. They spent about 2 or 3 weeks rebuilding the interface in that area. So there's lots of improvements in that space. It's much easier to use now, and of course it's going to work on mobile phones as well. So yeah, it's been much improved as part of this interface revamp. So these guys have spent and invested a lot of time in that area.
And 2 final things from us, documentation in general, whether that be not necessarily assuming so much prior knowledge, keeping documentation up to date, documentation of new features or modifications to features is probably one of the more critical things. And finally, just general integration with Microsoft, so particularly SharePoint, calendars, those sorts of things, being able to link up resource booking, push out, pull in, those sorts of things.
Just in terms of documentation, I'll answer that one, and then I'll get James to answer the rest. But documentation is one of my big projects. It's something that I am working through. We're trying to, as I said before, replace the wiki and sort of add it all to the new help area. You will notice that there is a tile in the new help centre that says documentation and then takes you to something that says coming soon. It is coming soon. You can probably imagine that it's a massive job because there are so many things to document. But yes, that is something we're aware of and certainly working hard to get on top of.
I'm just going to add to that as well that we acknowledged that we needed to keep feeding out more relevant information and usage, videos and documentation to help you adopt new functionality and also drive your own internal PD. That's actually why we hired Anna in that role in terms of a sort of customer success training and documentation type content production role. And she's been pretty instrumental already in her first few months. If you just take a look at our YouTube channel and look at the work that they're doing with that new help center, that's like all us actually addressing that for you. So more feedback, please. If you've got specific videos, if you're like trying to do something and you can't find the documentation, please submit a support ticket. Tell us that you want something and we'll actually go and produce that. Put it on the community.
Not a support ticket, put it on the community.
All right. Okay, so who should we have up next? Teachers? Do we have a rep for the teachers?
Yep.
Do you really have a rep for teachers?
Yes. Yes.
Who wants to do it?
Yes.
Well, in terms of upcoming trends, it was quite a bit on collaboration, whether it be inter-faculty, inter-class, or inter-school for international partner schools. But whether or not that's going to be a thing that you guys will...
It's certainly something we're very passionate about. So we've got the social stream, we've also got our integrations into the cloud documents. So we see that the cloud document system as being a wonderful way to collaborate on documents and development of documents, and then seeing them, I guess, embedded within Schoolbox will make it a much more seamless process that you can go to the correct curriculum area, find the right document, start working on it if you have the appropriate permissions through that cloud drive, and then work on that document collaboratively with your team. So that's how we see that all functioning.
Also, possibility of either being able to duplicate a page or being able to create a template to duplicate pages, like when I'm creating 5 Year 8 science classes, although I can link to the boxes, creating each individual page to start with can be a bit time consuming.
So I sort of philosophically have a bit of a problem with duplication. I find that it causes more issues than it solves, in that you end up with many copies of the one lot of content being spread across everywhere and no one knows which is the current version, which one's the most up-to-date and which one's correct. Now there are some use cases where duplication is okay, but in general I try and avoid that. So what we do within Schoolbox is try and link to materials, so we always have a link back to the source material so that you always have one true source for that document rather than creating many copies of it. So I do want to try and avoid having a duplication situation in Schoolbox where someone can go and create a copy of the one document 10 times or 15 times and then you never know which one's the
Sorry,
original.
I meant more of the style of the core class pages, like 8 Science 1, 8 Science 2, 8 Science 3. They all link to... for example, the unit, which is the one location, and all of the resources linked to the one location, but more like being able to duplicate the layout of the classes so that I have a uniform layout of each of the classes without actually having to recreate it 5 times.
Yeah, I think what we're probably looking at there is probably one of the weaknesses in the templating system at the moment is that you can't set a alternate source for many of the components easily in the templating system, but you should check that out and see if it is possible within the templating systems to build a template that represents what you want to achieve and then use that templating system when you select the homepage template.
Yeah. I know what you mean there. I think the issue is I shouldn't be bringing issues up, but I think the issue is, yes, you can template for specific classes, but then the problem is you might want to have 9A maths rather than year 9 maths. And so the linking to alternate sources there kind of holds you back, because if you make the change, it pushes through to everywhere. So what you really want is the perhaps the ability, I discussed this with the Avondale crew over lunch, maybe the ability to export a series of courses or, class pages and then import them somewhere else. So that would have more functionality in terms of, yes, you could export a page and then you could import it and change it up a bit. The other area where that might be useful is you could export a course if you were leaving a school and then go and put it somewhere else. James is going to hate me for that because it's a lot of work, but I see what you mean there. You want to sort of template what it looks like, but then be able to tweak it as well, rather than the copy.
Other than that, I've just emailed the rest, so yeah.
All right, do we have the executive, Richard? Or marketing while you're up the back there?
Marketing? Yes.
Thanks. We discussed a few things. The email digest doesn't order the news by topic. Is that something that can be fixed?
In terms of it being grouped by topic?
Yes.
One of the things we've got on the list for the digest email at the moment is actually changing it so that rather than showing past events, it shows future events. So that's something that we definitely want to do. There's some other issues with the digest in that if you make changes to news items after you've posted them, they still go into the news digest even though you may have deleted them. So we're looking at a way to redact news from the digest as well. So there are a couple of things we're looking at. In terms of the look and feel, there's not a whole lot we can do because it just is a list and things are added not necessarily by their category but by who they're for and in chronological order. So really we're just taking a chronological list of news that's posted and emailing it out to people. So it's not really of that form to be categorised.
Okay, we discussed engagement, so you mentioned it earlier in your presentation, and looking at being able to monitor behaviour based on families, so per family. Yeah,
we don't have that data, so we're unable to know who's married, who's not, who's in a de facto relationship. We don't actually have any of the relationship data, so unfortunately we're not going to be able to provide you with insights into family situations and what side of the family is using the system. So we can give you information on individual parents, but we can't look at it from a family perspective because we just don't have the data in our system.
Okay. And one last thing, we discussed hosting content for different social media channels in one location and pushing it out from Schoolbox so that it's done in one go, satisfying all the different social media needs.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And there are some methods for doing that already. And you can use a combination of RSS and different things to facilitate that. But yeah, there's definitely a need for something along those lines in terms of marketing. I think actually Chris has probably got a better knowledge and better awareness of those types of things. And Chris might be worth talking to about that process. So that's Chris.
Hi,
Chris from Digistorm, by the way. They've got a product called Reach that's specifically designed for targeting social media.
Social media, ads, websites, portals.
Yep. And so perhaps there can be some way we can work together to push to Reach and Reach pushes to social media. So that might be something we can look at.
Cool. I think that covers that.
We're getting really close. We're 5 minutes over for afternoon tea, so maybe this will be the last one. Yep. Yep.
We talked about parent engagement
and trying to look at ways of improving the information flows to parents. And in particular, what customisation they might be able to choose themselves to alter what they get within the system. So that feedback came from a new school that have only just adopted the product.
Yeah, just quickly on that, ultimately parents have a lot of control over how they get notified through the system. For anyone that's aware of all the notification parameters and settings, obviously now with the addition of the push notification as well, so they can definitely have that fine-grained control depending on how your school sets up those policies for those notification settings to be allowed for parents to modify and change. Is there any specific kind of content that you would want them to have control over?
I think it was the context of the marks and grading and what was visible and what wasn't.
Would you want them to control that, or would you not want to control that?
It wasn't my feedback on.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
Yeah, look, I guess the policy underneath the system has to allow that as well, so that might be something that needs to be looked at by the school. Dashboards based on campus, we just briefly mentioned that, and I know that's problematic, so we won't.
Yeah, does everyone know that, if you're in multiple campuses, you can't have multiple dashboards, so unfortunately we have to have a one-to-one relationship between a user and a dashboard. The dashboards are currently attached to the role, and that's also why you can only be one role per user. So they are linked just to the role. There are things you can do within that context though, because you can make content available based on campus on that dashboard. So you've still got some flexibility within that dashboard, just not control over the entire template.
As David said, some love for surveys, in particular branching logic if possible. And maybe not calling them surveys, just calling them
forms.
Generic. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because then we can use them for anything. And the final bit of feedback was a very interesting one. We talked about for quite a while around how to handle diverse learners. So the school in particular had quite a large population of children that had diverse learning needs, and how there were two elements to this, both content, how the content can be pitched differently at diverse learners, and also the functional UI elements to deal with children that have sort of special needs as well. So, thank you.
I just want to add on that. I think that we need to do a lot of thinking around individualised learning and how we approach that in general. And I'd encourage anyone who wants to get involved in those discussions to come and chat to me about it. As always, I'm no expert on these topics, so I'm happy to hear people who are experts on how we actually deliver that. Feel free to get in touch and we can chat about it, because it's certainly something on our agenda over the next few months to start thinking about and start developing a scope of work for.